All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started because it's after the noon 30 hour. I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to come and listen to some good information today for the August Lunch, Learn, and Collaborate meeting. And as always, I always like to start off with a few stats about our REDCap and our users. We currently have approximately 505 active projects. 197 are in production, 293 are in development. We have five that have been moved to analysis cleanup, and we have 10 that have been moved to completion or completed. We have approximately 589 users, active users, in our REDCap instance in ITS. We have 13 projects that have Mosio enabled and two that are Twilio enabled. A couple of comments about the REDCap unscheduled downtimes. This has been going on for a little while now. They're small windows, about 10 minutes, but it still is a little bit of annoying. So just want to let everybody know that we've been aggressively working to resolve this issue. We've been checking REDCap and system logs. I did notice that there was during some of those outages, there was some API export processes that were running. Not seeing the other contributors, but it's something to keep an eye on. And as you may recall by seeing your email, Monday evening, we adjusted some of the CPU settings in the Azure that runs REDCap, as well as made some changes in the REDCap configuration to address some of the memory. So maybe between the addressing the API exports, CPU, and the memory, we have resolved the problem. We will know in the coming weeks. Reminders of our training are on the screen here. There's a Vanderbilt and the QR codes. All these screens or these slides will be shared with you at the end of this presentation or by the end of the day at email. And so no need to try to do screenshots or capture the QR codes now. And also, I always want to remind you, if you don't mind, keep yourself muted until after the presentation, at which point we will have open up for discussion about the presentation and REDCap in general. Today's presentation is by Marcelina, who'll be talking about Intro to REDCap. And I'm going to take the privilege of saying thank you so much to Marcelina, who's been a faithful and dedicated REDCap guru as well as a leader to the RCC team. She will be leaving us soon, and she will share a little bit more about that in the next few minutes. And with that, I would stop sharing and welcome Marcelina to start presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. So I'll just jump right into Introduction to REDCap. We'll talk about general information, how to use REDCap, specifically talking about the project workflow and the different modes that a REDCap project can be in. A lot of the stuff goes on in development mode, and then what happens after development mode. So for those that may not know, REDCap stands for Research Electronic Data Capture. As you can see from this kind of blurry screenshot, this is where there's data collection for REDCap within the project. This view actually hasn't changed all that from when REDCap was created or from the screenshot, and I'll just kind of jump into why REDCap was created. It was created in 2004 by Vanderbilt as a user-friendly web-based interface to do research and data collection. This software is typically used for HIPAA compliant data or for HIPAA compliance. And there's a lot of customization that can go into REDCap. So it is both user-friendly in a way that you can customize it a lot, but there's also a steep learning curve. So we'll do a quick run through of all of like a high level version, and then we go in depth for our either past or future lunch, learn, and collaborate sessions on different aspects of it. So if you are in fact interested in any of these, we're more than happy to point you to the workshops, the LLCs that we've done previously, or you can even inspire new topics that we maybe haven't covered yet. So, our general information, why do we use REDCap, how to access it, what do I mean when I say that REDCap is compliant, what support can you expect from the REDCap admin team, and then who we are. We're all on call here, but you'll get to see our lovely photos and headshots in a couple slides. So why use REDCap as opposed to Qualtrics or Excel? It's HIPAA compliant. It has additional data security and encryption features. It's great for collecting longitudinal data, which means you're collecting data over multiple different time periods in events for the same person. I mentioned that there's like the customizable aspect, which will include randomization and branching logic. And then for REDCap, the data analysis within REDCap itself is uh, is limited, but you're allowed to export the data into multiple different programming languages and then doing the data analysis elsewhere. So it's really nice to have different data export file types. So how do you access REDCap? To request access to REDCap, we recommend going to the survey. This is separate from our request portal because we have to collect different information when you're accessing. This allows us to add you to the user allow list, and then that means when you go to here, you won't get an error that says you don't have permission to access this page. Something that sometimes happens is before the survey is filled out, users will sometimes get added onto REDCap projects and they'll still end up with that error. So before you add users to your projects, you can always send in this survey and you can add up to 5 users per survey response. FSU ID authentication uses your FSU ID. And so those are for our FSU affiliated users. And then our local REDCap login is for our external collaborators. So if you have users that don't have FSU IDs, we provide all of these instructions in our welcome email, again, once you submit that survey response to here for access to REDCap. So in terms of compliance, within each project, you have customized ability for access control, and that's specifically each user can have customized permissions. We'll kind of talk about the specifics of user rights. We've had a whole LLC talking about user rights as well, so you can see that in our past LLC archives. User roles, so that way you don't have to create user rights per person. You can create a generic role. So for example, like data entry study team member, and then anyone who is a data team study entry member will have the same permissions, and then data access groups. Again, within each project, we have an audit trail, so a logging depending on who's entering in the data, what data gets entered, email logging in terms of what notifications goes in and out from REDCap, and then project snapshots are really good for keeping track of the like the evolution of a project, if you're making a lot of changes and to match up with any modifications that you will provide to IRB. Lastly, data is stored on our FSU servers, which are HIPAA compliant and secure in that space. So that also falls into the compliance. The support that REDCap admin team provides as part of the Research Computing Center, we typically accept requests from the request portal. That's linked whenever you see a link that says like contact the REDCap admin team, or we also have it on our home page and our main projects page. The support that we provide for our users is account creation, consultation if you have particular build ideas or you just want to walk through a particular process, any technical support. So if you're experiencing an error, let us know and we can walk through what the issue might be and potential solutions. We can provide guidance on project build best practices, and then um, outside of our support within the request portal, we also communicate scheduled downtime and upgrade communications, as well as any project changes that get requested through our control center. So, for example, if you click the button that says move to production, you make any changes in your production project, if you'd like to request an API token, etc. So, who is providing that REDCap support? That would be us. So I'm the RCC REDCap team manager, and then Mark is our system administrator, and Semi is our REDCap admin support, and we are all on call. And we all receive those emails that go to redcap@fsu.edu, as well as those that go through the request portal when you select the REDCap. So, I can just jump into how to use REDCap, but first I want to kind of talk through an overview of the different stages of a project in REDCap. So once you have your draft protocol, every project that is created will start in development mode, and that's where we're building and testing any REDCap project. This is solely test data, and we make this very clear in our welcome email as well that we don't want to put real data in development mode because not only will that be a violation of IRB, but it'll also be an issue regarding like if there's any changes that you make in a project in terms of the fields or variables, then there's no like guardrails to kind of protect the data. So we super emphasize only putting test data in development mode. Once you're done building and testing your project and you're happy with the way that it looks, you're fully free to move the project into production where you can enter real data, review it and analyze the data, export the data, etc. If you happen to have any modifications to your protocol as you're going through the project, but you're like, oh no, I'm already in production mode, you can enter in draft mode and update the project setup. This is something that you'll need a protocol amendment for with IRB approval if your research is human subject research before it is pushed back into production. And then our last two modes over here are after data collection has been completed, and more when you're focusing just on analyzing the data and you want to make sure that you have a copy of everything. This also makes sure when you're analyzing the data that no additional data is accidentally put in if you're not receiving any input from participants and only from the study team. And then our completed mode is in a space of like the analysis is done, the project itself has been completed. This will limit access, I think, to one user, or that's what we recommend anyways, so that you don't have a lot of people on the project if you do end up moving it back to production mode. From both of these, though, you can move it into production mode again if something changes with the protocol and you are collecting real data. But I'll talk about this further on in more detail, closer to after we've kind of gone through development mode and production mode a little bit more. So when we're building a project, these are like our building blocks for making a project. I'll kind of start with data instruments because you'll encounter those first as you are going in and building a REDCap project. But to kind of get into the nitty-gritty, there's a bunch of different things that you can talk about for fields and variables, e-consent framework if you were collecting consent in the REDCap project, and then modifications that you might need to use for user rights and alerts and notifications before you start testing your project. So before you start off, even before you put it into REDCap, this can kind of be a sandbox playground for building a project, but I would say what makes the most amount of sense is sending it off to IRB in terms of the protocol that you're looking for, and then defining the data that you want to collect. So all the questions that you have within your study, make sure that they're getting translated into REDCap as variables, surveys, data entry forms. What is the time frame that you're looking at collecting these data, and then who has access to this data. So there's three different types of data collection. It can be by the study team, which are your data entry forms, by the study participants, which are typically through surveys, and then a mix of both, where there are data entry forms and surveys, or coming back and entering in information in a data entry form that isn't collected in a survey. The two types of projects, I mentioned longitudinal before as one of the big pros of using REDCap. Both the classical and longitudinal versions of projects allow one record per patient, but longitudinal expands that to different collecting by event, which can be in the same time point or different time point. You can also define multiple arms, which means you can organize your data collection based on different cohorts. When you go to, I guess before we go into creating an instrument in the record status dashboard, this is what a longitudinal study will look like, where it has each of the events up here in red, and then all of the data instruments that belong into each of the events located next to the record ID. The check marks, as you'll see here, are actually going to be your completed survey responses, and you can really tell when something has been completed as a survey or completed as a data form based on whether there's a check mark or not. Our gray boxes mean that this is an available form for that particular record, but there's no information in there. And yeah, so a classic study in the record status dashboard will not have these events listed on the top, but they will have these instruments listed here, but there will only be one instrument per listed in this space. What you can do with events is you can have the same instrument listed for multiple events, but that's something that we talk about in a different LLC, so I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but just know that there is a different view when you're looking at a longitudinal study versus a classical study. So in the designer, you can create an import and upload field or upload instruments, which is really helpful if you have multiple projects going on and you have a similar data instrument that you want to download the zip from one project and then upload that same instrument zip, and it'll retain all of the customizations that you have in terms of branching logic, in terms of field names. There's also this really helpful importing a new instrument from the REDCap instrument library. The thing about the importing instruments, though, is you're not able to change them. So what we typically see is users using the create a new instrument from scratch. And I'll just give here is like an example of what instruments might be included in your data collection instruments and then what type they are. So the difference between a survey and a data form is again that surveys can be publicly accessed by survey respondents, where our data forms are only going to be accessible via REDCap users within the project. So this I've seen before as a typical process or list of instruments within a given study. You can add more, you can remove the initial data one if you don't need one, but that's just a typical format. So when you go to create a data instrument and it'll ask you to add a field, I say field versus variable, oftentimes just because it's a field in REDCap, and then once it comes out of REDCap as a data export, it might be easier to refer to it as a variable. So I kind of use them interchangeably. So you can change the field type. You're able to change the field label, which is what is seen by both the survey respondents and the data entry people. And this is typically going to be your question space, or what do you see before you have an empty field for input. You can specify the variable name here, and then there's a couple different customizations you can have. So you can change the validation. If you want to make sure that they're making the format an email for this particular variable name, you can set the validation to email, or there's number validation that whether you want it to have like a decimal or a whole number, um, which will give you additional options like minimum and maximum, or if you want it formatted like a phone number. Um, you can change whether or not the question is required. And like it says here, it'll prompt if the field is blank once you go to submit, and it'll say like, hey, this is empty. Are you sure? Go back and fill out what's required. Identifier, signifying that a field is an identifier. And make sure that when there's like data export or data viewing processes, it it removes this particular field if it is if you're looking for de-identified information, it just automatically does that process. And you want to make sure that you're doing this as you go through with building to make sure that like anyone that does have access to de-identified data isn't getting like a secret identifier field. And when you go through your HIPAA training, they specify what is PHI data. Lastly, we have our action tag space here, which will allow for additional customization. We just did an LLC talking about specific best practices on action tags, so go check out those there. And here are all the different field types that we have. And when you select some of these, some of the options that I've listed before will change. It's just a matter of like I think we have the most customization with text box, but we'll get to see what those look like farther in. I wanted to highlight here just the calculated field. So when you're using calculations, that's actually going to be our next LLC in September. So if you're interested in that, check that out, which will allow you to incorporate the values from previous fields and calculate a variable in a new field. And that way you don't have to limit the data analysis for after. This can be something that's built in, but hidden from survey respondents. For our e-consent framework, it's helpful to have the signature field where someone can draw their signature. And I believe that's like one of the next couple of slides is to talk about e-consent. And then our descriptive text in our begin new section are just text to organize the survey or the data form. So when you create the field, this is effectively what it looks like. We have a couple different options here. So our radio buttons, our check boxes. For our yes, no option, this automatically just hard codes yes as a 1 and then hard codes no as a 0. And so that way you don't have to make sure that it's consistent if you know that the answer choices are yes and no. The difference between the date field here and the time field over here is that these are both text boxes, but they just have different validations. So this has a date validation with that particular format, month, day, and year. And then this has a time format with an hours, minutes. But they always come with a like now or today button. So that way you don't have to type in the exact moment if it's already today or now. And then, so not in survey spaces, but in your data form, you're always going to have this additional field called form status, whether or not it's complete. And so there'll be 3 different options. There'll be incomplete, which shows up as red on your record status dashboard, unverified, which shows up as yellow, and then complete, which shows up as green. And so what that does, and multiple different study teams have used it in different ways, but just come up with a way that you'll use it in your project. And so that way the indications are clear because complete, incomplete, and unverified come with each of the data forms that you make. So once you create a field though, this is all the information that kind of shows up in the designer space. And it comes with a bunch of different icons for you to go back in and again, make modifications to. This is the field name that we created. Since it's set as an identifier, we get this yellow person icon. The required looks like this, where you must provide a value. And then you can even see here that it specifies the validation type as an email. If you want to I'll jump to over here. If you want to edit and modify the field and go back to the place that we'd created it, you would click on this pencil icon. The branching logic is for this icon. And so if you, for example, have any conditional logic within your study, this is a good way to implement that. So it hides this field if say someone doesn't want to be contacted via email and would prefer to be contacted by phone number, you can hide this field if someone selects phone number, not email. You can copy this field if you have, if you want to make one for the personal email and maybe the professional email, you can move this field with this icon, and then you can delete this field with the with the trash can. So something also in the designer space, if you were collecting consent, is to enable e-consent. And this is already built into, REDCap as one of the survey options. You're able to collect specific identifier information so that you know on the final consent form who is consenting. In the survey space, the participant's able to see an entire compact PDF of all of the answers they provided within the consent form, and then the PDF itself will be hard copied into the file repository. So if anyone comes in and says like, oh, I consented this, but I didn't get a copy of it, you can pull that copy from the file repository and either send it to them via email or send it to them via email. So here are all the different, actually, not all of them. Here are some of the customizations that you can do for the e-consent settings once you enable the e-consent framework for a survey. This does have to be done for a survey, so that way we know that survey respondents are the ones filling out the e-consent. But you can check on where the name is placed in the e-consent, if there's other additional customizations you want to make to the PDF, and then where the signature field is to make sure that it's forcing the signature field to be erased if they're moving back and forth between the certification page, which is where they'll be able to review the consent form, and the page that they're on. So this is just, again, just a brief overview of e-consent. This will actually be our October LLC. And so if you're interested in finding out more information about e-consent framework, come join us in October. So another part of building out the project is making sure that your users are added with the correct permissions. There's a specific section on there called user rights. As you can see here, you can even customize who has access to user rights, but by default, if you are the one that created the project, you will have access to user rights and access to the majority of these options. As you can see, this is all of the different permissions that you can have for either one user or one role. So it's very granular in what you can and cannot have access to. So if you potentially see anything in this presentation or any of our other presentations and you are like, I don't see that in the REDCap project that I'm in, you may or may not have access to it. So I would just reach out to the person that has access to user rights so that they can modify your permissions if that's allowed within protocol. The biggest thing that I wanted to highlight with this is the space here that has the de-identified. This will, again, automatically pull our, the de-identified will automatically pull the fields that are labeled as identifier fields, or you can remove all identifier fields over here. And then the de-identified additionally removes the freeform text fields. But so that's one in terms of data export. The other thing I want to pull specific attention to is our API permissions. We still have a specific API token request process, but sometimes we see people go through the API token request and they have all of these unchecked in the user rights, so we can't actually grant them any access to the API. This needs to be configured first in user rights, and then you fill out the survey that asks for the API token creation, and then lastly, making sure that you request the API within that particular project. So that's why I have a note here that says API permissions are especially important, but somewhat confusing. I believe that there is talk of having an API LLC in the spring semester. So I would look forward to that if you're interested in learning more about APIs in REDCap. Okay, and then our last bit for building the project is setting up alerts and notifications. You're able to customize these really, really granular as well. So you can have additional logic based on data getting saved. You can customize when the alert gets sent out. It can be immediate, it can be like a day after. And then you can also add in smart variables and field variables as long as they are not identifiable information. You can add those in the message text. So if you want to make sure that people know when their next appointment is based on a field that you've generated in your REDCap project, this is a way to just put in like the name of the variable that you want to pull the information from instead of having to customize it per every record and message that gets sent out. The other part of alerts and notifications that is particularly helpful for the study team is that there are survey notifications based on when a particular survey is completed. And you can customize this based on like a particular study team member getting the email. For a specific survey. So if you enable survey notifications, it doesn't mean that you get all of the notifications for all of the surveys. It's again very granular. So if you just want to make sure that you're seeing it when people are filling out the qualifying questions survey or a screener survey, and then you can go and check into the project, that's something that's definitely doable in REDCap. Oh, okay. So here's another thing too. With alerts and notifications, they're always going to get sent from redcap at fsu.edu, and that's due to our firewall permissions. Regardless of what you put in alerts and notifications, we recommend including a message at the bottom of your, either at the bottom of your notifications or CCing your study team email in your response so that if for some reason there's a failure to send the email out, we know which study team to like forward the failed email alert that we get, but also so that if we get questions about the study at REDCap at FSU, we know who to send them to because we can't answer all of the questions for all of the studies. But I wanted to specifically shout out the Dear Lab in the College of Medicine because this is a template that I've pulled from one of the alerts that they've sent out, which was really helpful in kind of like letting us be detectives and trying to figure out which study failed alerts are coming from. So that's a lot about building in development mode. Do we have any questions about building in development mode before I move on to testing? Okay, just glancing at my other screen to make sure I'm not missing anything.
I don't see anything in chat.
Okay, perfect. Then I'll just jump into, we're still in development mode at this point, but now that we've had the building process mostly completed, this is the time that we want to start testing the data. We have different methods of entering the test data, and then we have different methods of reviewing the test data, as well as we want to also review that alerts and notifications are working for making sure that communications are operating between our study participants and our study team. So this is what potentially what a survey distribution tool will look like for participants. And again, when you're checking the logs, this basically means that a survey respondent is able to follow a link to access your data and enter in their own data. This is one, if you've ever submitted a request to our team, this is the Health Research Connections request portal. So it may or may not look familiar to you guys. Data entry forms are data entered by the study team, so you have to have a REDCap user account to enter in this data, and you also have to have access to the project. This is the same form as our previous slide, but just on the REDCap internal space. So as you can see, there's still name, there's still are you FSU faculty, student, or staff, and then there's still email address. As we see it here, but just formatted a little bit differently. And again, the access is slightly different as well. And then lastly, we can also enter in test data through the data import tool. So if you want to play with test records, but you don't want to have to go through the survey every time, you can import data using the CSV or XML import. And then again, very customizable, and you can also download a data import template so that it pulls all of the names of the variables, and then you can just import the numbers in that way. So once we have the data in there, we still want to make sure that our alerts and notifications are operating as normal. So for example, if we are completing that request form as a survey, and it has these conditional effects, this is when the email goes out. What's really nice about my alerts is that it'll actually tell you how many records were alerted, and then you can also view the list of the records, and those kind of get pointed back to the records, and then like you get a lot of metadata within my alerts, just to start off. And then again, to still review, you can jump into the notification log space and either view past notifications, all of the notifications based on a particular alert or a particular record. And then I think the really cool part is you can also see future notifications if they haven't been sent out yet, but they are scheduled to be sent out. Then you can also see and stop them if you don't want them to be sent out. So, with our data, even just our test data, we can still view all of that information in the record status dashboard. I have here the legend for the different status icons. Like I said before, your survey responses are going to be with the check mark, and then our data form entry by like the study team or a REDCap user is going to be without a check mark. So if you potentially see a survey response, or a lot of survey responses in a row, that definitely means that request is a survey, but you can also see a green dot within the survey, which means that it was filled out as a data form instead. Okay, so for our data exports and reports, this is prevalent on the left-hand side, and it's called data exports, reports, and stats. You can pull all of the data that's automatically there, or you can generate or you can generate custom reports based on different criteria, based on if you only want to view a subset of the data. And then in terms of the export, similar permissions and customizations can be made for exporting it as de-identifiable data. What different file formats, if you want it to be a CSV file or an XML file. You can also export it as a SPSS file, and there's a bunch of different ones. Again, we talk about this in our data visualization LLC that we've had previously. So if you are interested in seeing that again, let us know and we can present it maybe in the spring. So we've tested our data, we've built the project, we've tested our data, and we've gone back and reviewed any issues that we've had. And now potentially we're ready to move into production mode. So what does that look like? At the bottom of your project setup, you'll scroll all the way down and there's a button that says Move Project to Production. This means that you're ready to collect real data. We have a survey that you will need to provide the IRB documentation, IRB approval, the HIPAA training completion documentation for the whole team, and then confirm that all of the data is capable of being removed from the project, because all of the data should be test data. And then it ends up with the REDCap admin team for approval, and we just kind of check on all of the things that are listed in the survey space. Before we move the project to production. So all of the tools that we used in development mode for testing, we're able to use here, but now entering in real data, reviewing real data, and having live communications with the survey participants and the study team members. So the process is still the same, but now real data can be entered because and has extra safeguards in it as well. Because if we're trying to make any changes post-production, you have to enter into draft mode to make any changes to the production, and then you're able to see any changes in draft preview mode. These won't be viewable for survey respondents just yet, just because we're in draft mode and draft preview mode. But you're able to submit changes for review with the REDCap admin team approval. Make sure that your modifications are approved by IRB before the changes are submitted. And typically what our communication is between the REDCap admin team and the requester for any changes post-production are going to just be making sure that you're avoiding any data loss that could be crucial for your project. So this is one of our biggest recommendations, is typically to use the action tag hide choice instead of deleting a choice, because then that removes it for anyone who has answered that within the project. If we use hide choice, which is an action tag, instead we're able to just hide the choice for future future data entry, as opposed to deleting any of the past data entry. Okay, so we've gone from production mode, draft mode, if we need to make any changes. Once the project is done with data collection, you can mark the project as in analysis and cleanup. It'll make it so that the project itself is read-only. So that means that you're not entering in any data, which is great, so you don't accidentally modify any data once data collection is completed. And you can move the project back to production mode or move it fully to completed from analysis and cleanup. So it's not like you're stuck in analysis and cleanup for the whole time. And then the last bit, once you are done with your data analysis in analysis and cleanup, you can mark it as completed and it'll take it off your list of my projects. And you're able to have it as an offline project, so you definitely know that nothing's happening to it and it's effectively archiving the project. But we do recommend that you remove all of the user rights from the project to make sure that if you ever end up putting it back into production, it doesn't end up alerting a bunch of people that are maybe not a part of the study anymore. Okay, so that is like the briefest overview of REDCap and the life cycle of a REDCap project. Are there any questions about the presentation? I don't see or hear anything in terms of questions. Do we have general questions about REDCap? Okay, well, I will keep an eye on chat as I just go through these last couple of slides. Our upcoming events, I've mentioned them a little bit already, that our Lunch, Learn, and Collaborate sessions for the fall are using calculations and e-consent framework, and those are going to be in September and October. If you're interested in high-performance computing, I know this is not a high-performance computing presentation, but since REDCap and high-performance computing are under both under Research Computing Center. I figured I would put the workshops for HPC on here as well. If you're interested in any of the fall events, they're listed at the link below. We'll be sending out the slides later on. And then let's see. Oh, and then we have our end of summer announcement. So um, just an update since everyone is kind of back on campus for the first week of school. In July, we did a major upgrade from REDCap version 15.5 to 16.0. In August, we updated the HRC request portal 3.2 from 3.1 to 3.2. And we've listed those in a change log that's soon to be published, and we'll list that also on our homepage. And then our REDCap last day for migration extension is September 10th. And I guess as part of this unofficially, since Mark has announced it previously, is that today is my last day at FSU. I'm so grateful to be able to help and provide REDCap support for the last year. And I hope that for the continued success of REDCap and RCC. And with that, I think Alex is good to post any relevant links that we have in the chat. And we'll send those out along with our slides and our materials from the presentation. Thank you guys so much.
All right. Wonderful presentation, Marcelina. And I should be doing, nope, do that one, sorry. So just want to follow up, make sure everybody got their questions answered. A great presentation, a lot of detailed information. And as Marcelina pointed out, and Casey and Alex will be sharing, as well as Simi, sharing the slides, the video, and other information about this presentation in the coming days. Just will always like to wrap up by pointing out that these links will be out there in those emails and slides. So if you have any follow-up needs or information, you can refer back to this slide. I want to thank everybody for attending, and as Marcelina said, Simi will be presenting using calculations Wednesday, September 30th at 12:30. Hope to see you all there and hope you have a blessed afternoon. Bye-bye.